Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Smack Productions Live. I am your host, Michelle Campbell, and tonight's show entitled Daughters Who Did It is designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you to learn more about your own heritage. Tonight, I have four amazing women who I will call my sisters, as we all are members of the prestigious historical organization, National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. The discussion that will take place tonight does not necessarily represent the position of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. This show is brought to you to share stories and testaments of lineage to a patriot who fought or provided service. And what's it like to be one of the few Black women in this organization? The National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, and I'll just say DAR for short, was founded on October 11th, 1890, and is headquartered in Washington, D.C. It is a nonprofit, volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history through better education for children. The DAR has about 190,000 members in 3,000 chapters across the US and the world. Out of that 190,000 membership, there are approximately 100, now hear me guys, 100 Black women who are members. We have 5 of them right here tonight, if you count me. And 7 of those 100 Black women are in my family, with my grandmother, Beulah, being the oldest living Black DAR member at 101 years old. And I might go as far as to say she might be the oldest living DAR member overall. I'm not sure. Also, I have 2 sons who are members of the Children of the American Revolution, who soon can join the Sons of the American Revolution. So tonight, each of our panelists will tell us about their journey to the DAR and what's it like now that they are members. With that being said, let me introduce our panel. Starting with Karen Batchelor. Karen is a native Detroiter. Woohoo! From Detroit. She started doing genealogy as a result of a New Year's Eve resolution in 1976. Within 10 months, she stumbled on a completely unexpected Revolutionary War ancestor. As a result of this discovery, Karen joined the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution in 1977 as the first known Black woman to be ever admitted to membership. She is a current member of the Knickerbocker chapter in New York City, past regent of Louisa St. Clair chapter, and associate member of the Ezra Parker and Stony Creek chapters. She also serves as the national vice chair, of lineage research, committed to helping African American women who are interested in joining the DAR. Karen's journey to DAR was reported in dozens of news stories around the world, including the front page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, along with appearances on Good Morning America and NBC Nightly News. And check this out, everybody. This is a fun fact. She is even a Final Jeopardy question. And oh, by the way, I saw that one too. And oh, wow. I was like, there's Karen's name right there. And in 2021, she participated in an oral history project called Daughter Dialogues that memorialized the stories of Black women who joined the DAR. Her 3-part podcast interview is now part of the permanent archives at Harvard University's Schlesinger's Library. Karen's diverse family history includes Puritans and Patriots, the enslaved and slave owners, and even a colonial New England witch or two. In addition to DAR, she holds memberships in women descendants of ancient and honorable artillery company, the Winthrop Society, National Society New England Women, National Society Daughter of Colonial Wars, and Associated Daughters of Early American Witches. During her many years of chasing the long dead but not forgotten, Karen also had a fulfilling career in both corporate law and government relations. She belongs to the State Bar of Michigan, has served on 10 nonprofit boards, and is a longtime member of the Amateur Insurance Company Board of Directors. As a recent breast cancer survivor, Karen values above all time with family and friends. She has a son and two grandchildren and lives in Metro Detroit. All right. We got the first of the first up here. So this will be good, y'all. All right. Next up, we have Risha Rainey. She is a non resident fellow with the W.E.B. Du Bois Research Institute at Harvard University's Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, which is under the direction of Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr., host of Finding Your Roots on PBS. I love that show, by the way. She is the founder of DaughterDialogues.com and the host of Daughter Dialogues podcast, through which she shares her research collection of oral histories of African American women in the Daughters of the American Revolution. Reisha is also a member of the DAR. She was approximately the fifth known African American state officer in the history of the society and is a direct descendant of President Thomas Jefferson's grandfather through an enslaved woman named Mary. Risha is the founder and president of Inside Corporation, a systems engineering company which is ranked at the top 4% women-owned businesses in the United States. Wow. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Patricia Samuels. Patricia Samuels has been a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution since October 2012. She is a member of the James Campbell chapter and was recently appointed as the state vice chair for literacy promotion by the Texas State Regent. Patricia is a graduate of all of the leadership and genealogy courses in the DAR. Patricia was raised in a home where her father was a gospel promoter and radio disc jockey who brought legendary artists such as Sam Cooke, Shirley Caesar, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, and many others to their area. Patricia worked with her father in various capacities in ministry, including teaching the Bible on his radio broadcast some 14 years. Patricia is also a graduate of Texas A&M University and holds a master's degree in human sciences, psychology, and sociology, which she obtained with a 4.0 GPA and did so with a specific purpose of using her degree for ministry. Patricia is an ordained minister, author, missioner, and speaker. Welcome, Patricia, to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And last but not least, we have Nikki Sebastian. Nikki Sebastian is originally from St. Louis, Missouri. She graduated from Tulane University with a BA in American History, and she received her master's in Public Health Informatics from Emory University's Rowland School of Public Health in Atlanta. As the historical genealogist, Nikki's goal is to illustrate how professional genealogical research is a key but overlooked historical discipline. Nikki believes that truthful, ethical, and peer-reviewing genealogy based on primary sources is an essential tool in updating the narrative about who and what America is. She knows genealogy has the power to refute and debunk commonly held beliefs and assumptions about American society and culture. Nikki believes genealogy can be used to promote thoughtful civic engagement through our communities and can foster discussions about how the past informs critical social issues of today. In 2020, Nikki was awarded the Board of Certified Genealogists' first ever Paul Edward Slubby African American Scholarship develop and encourage more African Americans to enroll in one of 5 premier national genealogical institutes on their way to becoming certified genealogists. In 2021, Nikki selected Sault Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, and then enrolled in ProGen monthly self-study program for guidance in preparing her BCG portfolio, which she will submit later this year. Congratulations. Nikki created her website, www.lineagelogs.com, to help her keep track of all of her genealogical activities. Awesome. We got some smart women on this show tonight, people. All right. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining Smack Live tonight. So let's just get right to it and hear your amazing stories. So I'm going to start with the first question, and feel free, anyone can answer. This is the obvious one. So what made you decide to become a member of the DAR?
Everybody jump in at one time, right? I'll answer that question. I'll start off. I didn't even know I wanted to be in DAR when I started doing my family history in 1976. I wasn't looking for a Revolutionary War ancestor. I was just looking to find out more about my family. And as African Americans, so much of our family history has really been hidden from us over the decades. I just felt it was important to find everything I could. And, you know, I was truly surprised when I stumbled on, you know, finding that Patriot ancestor. But when it got down, that was the easy part, is doing the research. Joining DAR was a harder road to travel. But in part, I did it because I could. And I think that's a way to preserve, you know, my family history in archives that, you know, people go to generation after generation. And I think it was a way to recognize that I come from people who are resilient and courageous and determined despite the adversity that they might go through. So joining DAR was one way to celebrate that legacy that I've been given from my ancestors.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I might be I am an outlier because I did not do my genealogy or research. I am not a genealogist. I'm not a historian. I'm a mathematician and an engineer. And people who know me have heard me say this line many times. My cousin did the research, Gus Granger Turpin, for 20 years before we had all of the internet resources. So he went to courthouses and libraries and such. And they always told me, my family did, that I could join the DAR because I descended from Thomas Jefferson's grandfather, who had a relative, a grandson that fought in the American Revolution, from whom I descend. And I just didn't understand, like, what did that mean to me, since I'm not like a history buff, and that's really where my happy place is. So I joined at the urging of my father, and they just kept bugging me to join. So I did, and that's how I ended up in the DAR.
Awesome.
Well, I guess maybe I'm next. DAR really wasn't on my radar at the time. I was doing family history research, and I met a distant cousin, who was a member of DAR, and she was helping me with one particular line of my ancestry. But she told me how we were related. I didn't know her from Adam. I mean, we met online in a message board. And she started helping me answer some questions. And then she said, you know, you're eligible for DAR. And it's so funny because this is all message boards. So I said to myself, she must not know that I'm Black. You know? Like, she probably doesn't know that I can't join, you know, DAR. I'm Black. Because I didn't know. I thought it was strictly for white women, and totally not on my radar for that reason. And then it dawned on me, it's like she's helping you with your lineage. She knows she knows that you're Black. She's telling you about all of these people of color. So she knows, you know, she knew that when she told me. So it didn't happen immediately. I was reluctant at first, but maybe about a year or so into it, I decided that I would follow up on it and look into it and join. So that's how I got involved.
All
And I'm
right.
glad it all worked out really well. Everybody was really nice to me, and I found out that I was welcome and all of that. So it turned out to be a really good thing.
Great. All right, Nikki. Oh, we can't hear you. I know you're unmuted, but I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
I'm
got
sorry, there's some little thing that fell in my lap. Sorry.
you.
Well, unlike Risha, I was saying I am a history buff, so things like this, when I found out I possibly could have someone, I joined immediately because for that very fact I'm a history buff, and so that was a major factor in making me want to join. So
Awesome. Very good. So this question, the next one I have coming up here is for Karen. And being the first known African American woman to be admitted into the DAR, please share with us your story about your journey from you. Just well, you kind of talked about how you decided to how you got the bug to do it, but then becoming a member and that whole journey and process until you were actually accepted.
Okay, well, that ended up being the more difficult part of this journey. As soon as I knew that I was eligible, I actually wasn't really thinking about joining, but I had what I'll call a genealogy godmother, and she was an archivist at Detroit's main library. Her name was Margaret Ward. And she was encouraging me in the initial research, which of course this was before the internet, so I was at the library a lot. And she encouraged me after I made this discovery. She said, well, you should think about joining DAR. So I wrote several letters to chapters in my area. I looked them up, I wrote, and I got absolutely no response. And Margaret, I believe, was, very disappointed on my behalf. And she started talking to friends of hers who were in DC. And there was work going on in the background because there was actually some kind of rule at DAR that they did not accept Black women. And so the head of DAR at the time, the head of DAR is called the President General. She was open to the idea of, a Black member and opening the doors. And so she worked behind the scenes. I ended up being contacted by the Royal Oak chapter, Royal Oak, Michigan chapter, Ezra Parker. And they said, we will sponsor you, because at that time, that was what was required. 2 people had to sponsor you. And so I was voted into that chapter. It wasn't until many years later that I learned that another local chapter had actually voted on me, but they had blackballed me. And if you don't know what that means, you've heard that term, but it actually means they voted with little black balls and little white balls. And I got some black balls, which is why I didn't get into that chapter initially. And so after I became a member of the Ezra Parker chapter, which was in October of 1977, then I actually got a call from the head of DAR, and she said that a chapter in California wanted my whole file. They wanted to go through it because they did not believe it was possible for a Black woman to prove her lineage back to the American Revolution. And they wanted to make it their annual project that year to go through my papers and figure out where the mistake had been made. And so needless to say, those papers were not sent to them, and we moved past that. But it was a rocky road. And as a young sister, I was only in my 20s then. It was interesting to walk the halls of Constitution Hall in DC, the DAR headquarters, and not see any other women of color. And so I'm so glad now that we've made progress.
Well, you broke through that glass ceiling for us because we were capped off for almost 100 years before you got in, right? So
yeah.
we thank you. Yeah.
You're
So
welcome.
yeah, appreciate it. And thank you for sharing that story with us too. I remember hearing the story. My personal take on that is you were actually one of the people who helped me actually find an interest in actually going forward with the DAR. I remember
our talk.
Yeah, I was sitting there. It was, oh gosh, it was over 10 years ago. I said, what, I've been in the DAR for since 2011. And yeah, I was having that conversation with you and it was like, oh my God, I'm talking to a legend. She's the first. And okay, and you were, telling me your story, your journey, and I was just so inspired. I was like, I love when we just, break that mold. And since that time, look, we got almost, a little over 100 people of color, women of color in there now. I'm just saying African American. There are Native Americans and other nationalities too, but specifically for our ethnicity, it was really a joy to talk to you even then without being in the DAR. And you're right, it's not easy to get in. I mean, I don't know if anybody that's listening has ever tried, but even folks that don't look like us have a hard time getting in. So you can imagine what it's like for someone of color, and especially being the first to break that kind of that ceiling to let others like ourselves on this call and show to get in. So let me go right to the next question here. And this is kind of going back in history. So I hope you guys can remember a little bit about your patriot, but I would like for people, each one of you, to talk briefly about who your patriot is. And I know some people looked at the flyer and they're like, this is where you all live. You live in Georgia. I'm like, no. This is where my patriot is from. They're where their patriots are from. So if each one of you could just take, 45 seconds to a minute and just give us kind of who your patriot is, where they came from, what kind of service did they provide or fought or what have you, and kind of how you're linked to them.
Well, we think you should go first, Michelle, and talk about your patriot, your Georgia patriot.
Good point.
Sure. So my patriot, his name is Robert Hart, and he's from the great state of Georgia. He started out actually as a drummer and became drum major. So, that sounds like, oh, he was just playing the drum, but I'm telling you, every little part meant something, and just to clarify for people, if you gave some soldiers food while they were fighting and they came to your area, you actually are considered, a servant, if you will, or server, or provided a service for the Revolutionary War. So even as a drum major, he played a significant role. He actually has a nice, I guess you call it a waymark down in Georgia that talks about him. The family line, it's the Hart family, has a long lineage in Middle Georgia. So it's a well-known name in that area. So if anybody's ever in Macon and you hear Hart, that's our people. 9 times out of 10, it's someone in our family that's related to that lineage. And how I'm connected, he's like my 5th great grandfather. It goes through. And so for me, it was extra hard because I went through all women to get to my patriot. And so it was like, myself, my mom, my grandmother, her mother, who happened to be his daughter. So it was like 4 or 5, 4 women before I could get to the man. So, with name changes and getting married, and then someone's spouse dies and then they get remarried, and then you got to show death certificates, marriage licenses, birth certificate. It's a lot when you have to go through a woman, just so you know. But that was kind of how I got into the DAR, through that line. And I want to just add too, I know I'm over my 1 minute that I passed you on. But I have people that don't look like me, white relatives, who have embraced me in the family, have participated in our family reunions, have shared stories that go all the way back to England, which has really put together the piece of the pie that I didn't have for our ancestry. I went back pretty far, but when I synced up with my Caucasian family members, they gave me a wealth of information it dates back to, like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but like 500 something BC.
Wow.
And, but you got to understand too, I've been doing genealogy for 30 something years too. So before there was an internet. And so I had a lot, but I didn't have that piece. And for them to actually come to the reunion and share that story, you would think it was boring, but that went on for like 2 hours and everybody was captive, it was a captive audience. So I don't know if anybody listening has a joy and delight just hearing about their family, but it was so interesting to me. And I'm gonna stop there.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I told you our small connection.
Yes.
The way DAR is a small world. There are people in my chapter, my Georgia chapter, who have the same patriots. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can go if you want me to go next.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And I will be very short because I don't know a lot about my patriot. My patriot is Edward Barrett, and all of Halifax County, North Carolina. And all that I really know is from a small piece of paper, a pay indent, just with his name on it, and says he donated supplies and he was reimbursed 460 pounds for the supplies. It doesn't say what the supplies were, or that's all the detail I have. So I don't have an exciting story. And as people probably are aware or not aware, to join DAR, you have to prove service, or you have to prove that your ancestor donated supplies, provided military service, or provided supplies in support of the American Revolution. So that's the story of my patriot. He provided supplies
All right.
support.
Anybody else want to go next?
Well, I actually now have found a number of patriots, so I have at least 10 ancestors who fought during the American Revolution. But my initial patriot was a young man when he served. His name was William Hood. He was from Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. So that's like on the west branch of the Susquehanna. And back then that was like the frontier. There was no what white people would consider civilization on the other side. It was all Native American. And he served in a troop, and they were called to the rescue of a fort called Fort Freeland. And that fort had been attacked by several hundred Native Americans who were working with the British. And so, my ancestor, William Hood, was one of the people called to, the relief of this fort under attack. Unfortunately, the fort fell. Many of the people in his troop were killed, but he survived, went on to fight in the War of 1812, and he moved up to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is where he settled. And I've been there. It's just a little town with, one stoplight. But that's where my great grandmother came from, and she was white. He was a white patriot, and she married an African American man, and that's how my line comes together. How we cross the color line. But I think it's important to point out that as Black women, as women of color, our patriot could be Black, because there are known Black patriots who fought in the American Revolution or gave service, and it could be someone white. And there are also probably white women now who have found that their patriot is an African American. So I would say don't judge a book by its color.
Okay, I like
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, all of my patriots were white men, but there were a lot of African Americans who gave service to help make this country come together, and
Yeah.
you know, we honor them as well.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Guess
Okay.
I'll go next.
Yeah.
Patricia's not ready to go yet. My patriot's name is Thomas Turpin. He was born in Henrico County. Thomas Turpin was President Thomas Jefferson's uncle by marriage. Thomas Turpin
Mm.
married Mary Jefferson. They had 11 children. Mary Jefferson was the younger sister of Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter. So
Okay.
when Peter Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's father, when he died, Thomas, my patriot, was named one of the executors of his estate, which meant that my patriot had some fiscal and material responsibility for a teenage Thomas Turpin. I mean,
Mm.
Thomas Jefferson,
Yeah.
sorry. So
Mhm.
my patriot had some responsibility for President Thomas Jefferson when he was a teenager. And Thomas Turpin, my patriot, he is a prominent individual and large landholder in colonial Virginia. He was a militiaman, reaching the rank of colonel, a legislator, a justice of the peace, a church warden. I don't know. He did so much. This was all in Cumberland County, Virginia. He was also a renowned horse breeder and a businessman. He actually did the survey of the land holdings of his brother-in-law, who's Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson. So that was pretty interesting.
Mhm.
They had a relationship together. And Thomas Turpin, my patriot, owned a house in Richmond that served as the residence when Thomas Jefferson was governor. So for Governor Thomas
Mm.
Jefferson, my patriot was of European descent. He was a slaveholder. But his grandson, Edwin Turpin, purchased and later married an enslaved woman named Mary, who had 9 children with Edwin. So that is, Edwin emancipated the children and her prior to the Civil War.
Awesome.
You forgot Canada.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. So Nikki knows my story too. Edwin, who I told you was the grandson of my patriot who married, who was with Mary, the enslaved woman. Well, he took her to Canada to make it legal and married her because it
Oh,
was
wow.
legal here. They moved back to Virginia and they lived together in the same house. But of course, a white man living with a black enslaved woman at that time was not acceptable, and the neighbors burned down their house. But each time they rebuilt. And it's common for a white man to have a white wife and to have a black wife, meaning an enslaved woman with whom he had a long-term relationship. He never had a white wife. He only had the enslaved woman named Mary as his partner and legal wife, and that was recognized legal in Canada.
Mhm. Mhm. That's good. That's good. Great story.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Trisha.
I always like hearing everyone else's story, the genealogist and me. And I was kind of waiting to go last because I know you were interested in my having a patriot that's kind of off the wall here. And that is off the beaten path, perhaps we should say. But that's because my patriot is from Louisiana. I'm a Texas daughter. My patriot is from Louisiana. His name was Pierre Richard, and he fought in with the militias of Louisiana, and they joined the cause in, I believe it was 1779. And the reason I have this patriot that was not part of the original 13 colonies, they were down in Louisiana, as I said, and then they were under Spanish rule at the time. Louisiana flip-flopped. Sometimes they were French, sometimes they were Spanish. They were under the Spanish rule at the time. The Spanish were pretty neutral to the American Revolution. They were sympathetic with the rebels, but they didn't want to get involved. It wasn't their fight. But they did want the rebels to prevail. And at some point, they decided to join the cause because they had the common enemy. They hated the English. So they decided that even though this is not my fight, I'm going to help you fight because I can't stand them. So they got involved with it, and not only did the Spanish that was ruling Louisiana get involved, but the French got involved. So and my patriot is of French descent. So he descended from, they lived in Canada and they were deported to Louisiana. The English deported them. It was called Le Grand Dérangement in French, or the deportation. And they were deported because of, it was I believe it was the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War was going on, and they felt like the French in Canada were sympathetic to France and not to Britain. So they're like, we're getting rid of y'all. So they sent them many different places, but my ancestor ended up in Louisiana with that group of people, and so they're there. It's a good 20 years later, and like I said, the Spanish had their problems with the British, the French had their problems with the British. So everybody was like, okay, we'll band together and we'll fight. And so so they got these militias together, and they saw battle at Baton Rouge and in West Florida. The Spaniards had originally owned West Florida. So they were smarting because they had lost that and they wanted to get that back. So that's the reason that all of my guys got involved in the American Revolution and how we get these Louisiana Patriots.
Yeah, that's good. See, I didn't know that. I was wondering when I saw Louisiana, I was like, how did that happen?
How'd that happen?
Yeah, but that's a great story. And that's actually a learning, historical moment for me today, because I always just associate Revolutionary War, 13 colonies. It got to come from one of those. But to hear kind of that spin to it with, being deported, I didn't even know that even happened. So now I got to go back and read up on some history from
the
day.
And a lot of people died during that deportation. So it wasn't just like
Really?
y'all get out and move.
Oh,
I
it
mean,
was
it was
hostile.
it was a massive thing, and they lost a lot of their owned property, and they were doing very well in Canada. So they
Yeah.
lost a lot of things and had to become servants, and
Wow.
so you can just imagine the atmosphere and the mentality of when all of this happened. Like, yes, we'll fight, and their battles that they fought, they were very successful in subduing the English in West Florida and in Baton Rouge.
Okay. That is very good. Everybody, just very, very interesting stories. I'm going to go to the next question here. Has your membership in the DAR opened doors for you that otherwise may have not been opened? If so, please explain.
I can take that one. DAR is, now I'm speaking genealogy wise, has opened the door for additional patriots and additional lineage societies. Because in my particular case, when I joined, we have speakers. We have monthly meetings, and there's just different speakers. And one particular speaker in my Atlanta chapter, I remember, was this historian. His name is Brad Quinlan, and he's a historian at Marietta National Cemetery. And he spoke at one of our sessions, and I was just intrigued. He's really passionate about African American soldiers at Marietta, and he presented about that. So I talked about that, and my family came down to visit, I think for Thanksgiving one year. So I scheduled a private tour at the cemetery, and he took us, my nieces and nephews, all around. So it was just fantastic, and that got me more inspired and just learning more about just the U.S. colored troops, and they weren't just in the Massachusetts 54th, the movie Glory. They were all over, including here in Georgia, in Atlanta, in the Battle of Atlanta. And we talk about the burning of Atlanta. There were thousands of Black troops that were here that I never heard about. I didn't know that story. So to make a long story short, I have attended 2 grave rededication ceremonies for U.S. colored troops at Marietta, in and around Marietta. There was one at Marietta National. They were trying to get a soldier buried there. There was dispute whether or not he belonged there because he was Black. They found his remains. They knew he was African American from his remains, but whether or not he was a soldier, it was debatable. So he's still not buried at Marietta National. So we're still working
Where
on
is
that.
he at?
He's in a box. he's a relic. Someone found him, someone cared enough and reached out to Brad and Marietta National and said, we have we have these remains. Can we get him buried? So we were working on, we had a ceremony for him, and I have a video of it at my website. It was last July, but Marietta National has not agreed yet to inter this U.S. colored troop. So things like that is what I'm saying that I learned about, which inspired me to go back and look and see if I do have a U.S. colored troop. And I did find one because I went back again, but primarily because when I did Daughter Dialogues with Risha, a DAR member reached out to me and said, she was a DAR member, but she was also part of National Society Daughters of the Union or Daughters of Union Veterans. I don't remember which one, I'm so sorry, but probably, I think Daughters of the Union, I believe. I joined both of them, but because a DAR daughter heard about it and she encouraged me to continue to, well, try this one too, try another one. And I did, and I found a colored troop from Mississippi. My ancestor. So I'm just saying this it will inspire you. If you find one ancestor, when you join DAR, you will find more. If not other patriots, you'll find other service, 1812, you'll find Civil War, you'll find all kinds. So as far as for me, it opened up more brick walls for our family tree. So
awesome.
For me, the door that opened is not genealogy related. As you said in my introduction, I'm a businesswoman, and a woman in the chapter became very close friends, and she was more connected in the local community than me. And she introduced me to some people that kind of, I wouldn't say those people opened the doors, gave me the opportunity to go get those doors opened for me. But she started the ball rolling in some things that kind of led to more success for my business. And that was an unexpected benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anyone else? If not, we can.
Well, I'll just share that when I finished my initial research back in the late 70s, there were no degree programs for genealogy, although I was so passionate about it at the time. And so it led me to law school, because by the time I went to law school, I had these kick-ass research skills.
Yeah.
And I said, well, this is a great way to use them. And so it did lead me to the practice of law, but I never left that passion for genealogy behind. I was always a history nerd as a kid. But I became more as an adult, and my friends and family will tell you as they roll their eyes when I tell them the latest story or the latest discovery. It's something that never ends.
It doesn't.
And so I am that person who, when I'm 95, I'll be researching, God willing. And what it does for me is it's really a way to place myself in American history in a variety of ways. So, I'm already in other lineage societies. I'm probably eligible for at least 50. You're only limited by your time and your interest and your money in terms of joining other lineage societies. But what it's done for me is allowed me to understand that I need to share my story so that others can understand that as African Americans, knowing our history is so incredibly important for this generation and the next and the next. And for me, it's allowed me to become that person who maybe that's how my grandmother was. She told us the stories of our family, and she only had an 8th grade education. That was my dad's mother. But I've become kind of that person. I'm the chief family historian. And if that's a good outcome from, joining DAR, then I'll take it.
Absolutely. I feel you on that one. I am my family's historian too. And sometimes I wonder if people say, I host meetings and stuff. I do PowerPoint presentations. talking about different family members and
And
things.
nobody's listening, are they?
Right, right.
You know, but it's funny because we sat in a double tree, a banquet room in the double tree, and literally, I think it was about at least 3 hours long, and everybody sat the whole time. I am not kidding you, because once you get into it, I don't know. To me, it is interesting because it shows your connectivity to how this world came to be, right?
It
It's
does.
like your lineage, their contribution to what you see today. And I think even like what we do now in our professional careers or our extracurricular activities, this is stuff that we can pass down to the generations. They won't forget us in 100 years. That, I think because of all the things, you, Karen, being the first, Risha having daughter dialogue, the Louisiana Patriot, Nikki with all these genealogies, they won't forget us. They won't forget this. And that's what I want to pass on. My kids, they don't care about this stuff right now, but
Right.
one day
They
somebody,
I hear you.
maybe their
They will.
grandkids will be like, man, my great grandmother, my grandmother spent the time to pull all this together. Man, she must have been awesome. A lot of time on her hands, which I don't, but it's, you want to leave a mark. I don't know. I do. I think
And it's
we all want to
important.
leave
Yeah.
It's
a
important.
mark on
It's
this.
such a
It's our
concerted
legacy.
effort.
It's
This is
our
such a
legacy.
concerted effort to obfuscate, to hide this, to ignore, to write us off, to write our
Yeah.
history, our contributions
Right.
off. So it's very important. And it's important to be the family historians, whether people care or not, whether people are
Mhm.
listening, which they are. Your family is. It's just, you want them to be as interested as much as you are, but they
Right.
may not always be, but they're listening. They are listening, and
Yes. Yes,
it'll
they
be
are.
passed on. So
Yeah.
And that's what DAR opened for me. I was thinking about the question, and I took the genealogy courses and the
Mhm.
leadership courses during the pandemic, during the shutdown period,
Mhm.
and I was just thinking about that. Had I not been a member of DAR, I wouldn't have been able to take those classes. So
Mhm.
so I'm really grateful that I was able to take those, and the doors, I believe, are opening now. Things are the future's there. I'm laying the foundation now for
Yeah.
for great things, more service in DAR.
Awesome. Did we get everybody on that question?
You did.
All right. I know we just get to talk and sometimes you forget where we at, but the next question is, how have you been treated? And I think some of you already talked about this, by non-Black members of the DAR. And if any of them are family, how is your relationship with them?
It's been great for me. Everybody's been very nice, and I'm truly grateful for that, because part of the impetus in me joining is because at the time I was in a department at work that was solidly racist and had all of
Mm.
the isms, sexism, racism, everything you could think of was going on in that department. And I started thinking, because I'd always been around white people, I've always, and other nationalities through school, going to predominantly white schools and
Mhm.
that kind of thing, and I've always gotten along, and there was really no issues for me growing up, so I couldn't figure out why this department was just this horrible, and I didn't want to stay in that situation and become tainted by it and start
Mhm.
hating, start disliking, and then maybe turn that into hate later. So I was like, I need to get around some better thinking and some better acting people. And that's why I started remembering how the cousin had encouraged me to join. I'm like, well, maybe I'll get, and I didn't know all the history. I didn't know what Karen went through. I didn't know it, because I think if I had known that, we would have gone that route.
Well, I'm glad you didn't know then.
Yeah, I think God,
Yeah.
kept me ignorant there, from the history. But fortunately, when I did join, I had no issues like that. The people were just extremely nice, and it's just w- we're friends, and I love it. I really do, and I encourage other people to join. But it's kind of like the whole family historian thing. They're like, they're not quite ready or not quite understanding what all that is yet. So
Well, I understand and respect that Karen will have a very different story than mine because she paved the way and she already moved out those waters. So people like me that she joined in 77, I joined in 2010, that it's going to be a different experience. So keeping that in mind, when I came in 2010, I was completely embraced. And some of the women in my chapter and in the state, my state is Maryland, are this isn't just a cliche. They're some of my closest friends. They're like my best friends. And although there's an age difference, we might be, generations apart. We have fun. We laugh together. When I lost my dad in August, I'd say out of the 150 cards that I got, probably 80 or 90 of them were from members of the DAR across the nation. They show up for me. So I'm just telling you what my experience has been. And it's a wonderful support system that I just didn't know what life was like before having this, with having this. It's very gratifying to have this sisterhood and the friendship and to walk in the room where people are excited to see me and are welcome. That might be a little different in the business world when you have such competition out there, but it's very nice when you walk in the room. It's like very warm.
That's great.
I mean, my experience is similar to Risha's. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't be in it. If I didn't feel accepted, if I didn't feel valued, I didn't feel my contributions mattered, if I wasn't learning, enjoying, or having fun, I wouldn't be in it. And that's what you always have to ask yourself. Are you having fun? Number one. And that's, if you are having fun, that's important. And I am. And not just having fun, is, as I mentioned earlier, just about learning, just being a better researcher. I've had leadership positions in my chapter in Atlanta. I love my chapter here. I'm in another chapter as well, and I have a position there. I was recently elected to a position there. I a daughter. I'm a member of DAR in every way, and I love it. And I've had a wonderful time. I have 5 family members who have followed me because I have convinced them, and I have one cousin who joined Sons of the American Revolution in Maryland finally. And I'm so happy for those cousins because they have children. So I pay the way for their kids to when their kids are 18 and ready to go. I'm just so happy. But yeah, if you're not having fun, why do it? And I'm having a boatload of fun. So
I might have a little different perspective.
We knew Karen would.
Although I would agree
Thanks
with
to Karen, we're
lot
having fun.
that the others have said here. I mean, I have some amazing friends that I've made that I treasure among my DAR sisters. I give back through doing genealogy to help other African American women come into the organization. So the genealogy part of DAR is a part that I really have a passion about. I would tell you that DAR is a volunteer organization. So you have the national level, and then the women in the chapters are volunteers. And so just like anywhere else, you get a slice of America in those chapters. And I will tell you, honestly, there are people that I've learned I don't want to spend time around. And what I think is important for women who might be thinking about joining DAR is not only are they vetting you, by going over your application and your proofs showing your lineage, but you should be vetting them. Like, what chapter would you like to belong to? What's the culture of that chapter? Because overall, yes, there's the DAR culture, but each chapter is unique. And so you want to make sure that you find the chapter where you're around people who are doing all those things that you just talked about, embracing you and and you know, honoring your friendship and all of that. But you have to pay attention to where you are. And I think that's a big lesson that I've learned about DAR, is that I want to be with as many like-minded people as possible, because I'm 70 years old. I mean, at this point, I don't want to waste my time being around people who think radically differently from me and in a way that upsets me. So I'm just being really candid here. I think that there is no way I would ever leave DAR. I'm in it for life, and I'm looking forward to, you know, hopefully seeing my granddaughter, who is just turned 7. Hopefully she'll end up being in DAR one day. I hope I can inspire her. Hope I can inspire my grandson. And you know, you can't do anything from the outside. So staying in DAR, being here, doing the things that we're doing as daughters is really important. And I'm committed to that. But, you know, it's not always, I won't say that it's always a happy face.
Yeah, I would admit, I've had like good, and I wouldn't even call it bad, just interesting situations. So my Illinois chapter is absolutely the best chapter to me. You know, there's 3,000 out there, but I'm telling you, Ansel Brainerd Cook chapter is a good chapter. I was the first African-American DAR member in that chapter. And they always tell me, you had the hardest application, but these ladies worked to, I mean, they went to Washington, D.C., sat down with the master genealogist and went through all my paperwork and explained everything through. And I forever will be grateful to them. Leaving Illinois and then going, I won't name the chapter name, but I went to Massachusetts. And I was looking for a chapter, and I just, you know, emailed, and they were like, oh yeah, come to, you know, one of our meetings. Now, I only know how we do things at Ansel Brainerd Cook, right? So for me, I'm all, you know, with my sash, with all my pins and, you know, the Patriot, whole nine, right? Really dressed up, because we met in a professional, like city hall building or something. So when I went to this one, it was in someone's home, which is fine, but I still had everything sashed up and everything. And I, just like Patricia, you said, you don't think they knew that you were Black. I know they didn't know I was Black, because I'm ringing the doorbell. They looking like, who is this? I'm like, hi. And they're like, okay. And so I already knew, like, okay, this ain't gonna work for me. To your point, Karen, you have to vet them, and you have to know your chapter, right? And so
do your due diligence is what it is.
Yeah, you got to
figure out where you're gonna fit. Now that you've figured out that you want to be in DAR, figure out which chapter you want that's gonna be home for you. Real home.
Yeah. So home is always gonna be Ansel Brainerd Cook. And those ladies, they're just fantastic. I mean, even like my grandmother is part of that chapter, my mother's part of that chapter, my cousin is part of that chapter. So I was just like, once I got in, everybody getting I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I've already done all the hard work, just, you know. And it kind of was easy for my grandmother and my mom, right? Because I had to go through them to even get in it. So it was just, the stuff is here, go ahead. And so we went to Continental Congress, and you know, I love all that, and the pomp and circumstance, and you know, everything, dressing up and being able to just meet sisters from all over. And I mean, that to me, to be there at Continental Congress in DC was just like, okay, this is the real deal here, you know. They put it all the way out, and it's very well done. And you know, everybody, so then it's opened up, and you got people from different chapters, and you got people who love you to death. Some people looking at you like, okay, we okay, you know. But hey, it didn't matter to me, because I'm used to that environment, being an engine, you know, background in engineering, and being in a predominantly white and male field, this was an old hat for me. So, but yes, you can have you may have to have a little thick skin at times, depending on what environment you're in. But I think honestly, it gets better and better with every decade. And, so for what you did in 77, fast forward to 2022, it's a whole lot better. I mean,
It is.
It is so different. And I just wanted people to understand that. Like, if you got something in your head from the Marian Anderson stuff or whatever, get that out your head, because I'm serious. That kind of has gone away to some extent. You see, we got women on here in leadership position. We got a past region. We got some heavy hitters, vice chairs and whatnot. They weren't going to let us do that if Karen hadn't paved the way. So it definitely has changed for the good.
Today's
it's also that there's so many other, I call us their sister daughters, who are, coming into the organization and embracing, being in DAR. And that is what drives the change, is the more of us who show up.
Yep. So I know we're at 8:30. I got more questions. I'm gonna jump a little bit because I want to make sure I get the ones that are pointed to certain people. So we kind of hit yours, Karen, and yours, Patricia. I do want to pose one to Risha. You led an oral history project entitled Daughter Dialogues. Can you explain to our audience what this is and where they can access these dialogues?
What it is, are you fabulous women making it possible for this project?
Yes.
So, it is an oral history project that is published as a podcast. So it's not really a podcast, even though that's what people call it, and that's perfectly fine. It's available on daughterdialogues.com or anywhere that you get your favorite podcasts. And it's the oral histories of women who descend from a Revolutionary War patriot. These are women of color that have proven their lineage by their membership in the Daughters of the American Revolution. So typically in lineage societies or heritage societies, the story is always about the patriot or your ancestor. And since I told you I'm kind of an outlier, that wasn't what was interesting to me. I wanted to know about present day. Why did you women join this society? What's interesting to you? Who are you? So I wanted to give the women who joined a voice. And it starts off, that was confusing to a few of my participants in the beginning. You want to know about me? I just want to talk about my ancestor. No, I want to know about you as a woman. So there's 3 parts. As one is their biography. Where did they grow up? What was their childhood like? And that is so fascinating. And they're trying to rush on to talk about their genealogy, and I slow them down. And then we talk about genealogy and any family story that has, even if it has nothing to do with their patriot, just what are the oral histories that have been passed down or through the oral tradition in your family. What else do you know about your family? And then we talk about the DAR. Why did they join? What has their experience been like? And so all of those oral histories have been actually have kind of sucked me into liking history because
it's cool.
Oh gosh, I get to know these women everybody does. If you listen to the oral histories, you get to know these women and what trials they went through as a woman. So that's the first part. What have you gone through as a woman? And women are women. We can all relate to that. And even men like to listen to it because they have women as their mothers. And then after that, it's not, again, it's a research project. So it's going to be it's going to be preserved into perpetuity at Harvard University's library, which is called the Schlesinger Library for Women in History at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute. And it's arguably the women's largest archive devoted to both the history of individual women and in women's organizations. So it's very important that we know that it isn't just going to live in the podcast world, because that's a temporary technology. This is it's already been deposited. I've already deposited 25 oral histories that are in Harvard's hands now. So they're working on that, indexing it. They're going to do what's called a finding aid, which the archivists are very excited about. That's a tool that they like, so people can find it and it won't be just put on a box and on a shelf, which is, I just love that they're doing that with this work. And again, I'm doing that at the direction of the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute as a non-resident fellow, which is under the direction of Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr.
Yeah, and I love what he's done, and I know he's a son, so
yes.
Yeah, good stuff, Risha. Appreciate all the hard work, and I actually enjoyed. I could have talked forever on that thing, but
she made it so easy.
She did.
I gave Karen the longest time because she deserves it. She's the pioneer. We wouldn't be here without her. So Karen has 3 episodes. I like to not go over an hour and a half max, but I gave Karen 3 of those hour-and-a-half segments. Just go for it.
But Risha, tell them when we did our recording.
It was New Year's Day. We were New
Year's Day in the middle of COVID.
Right. Yes. And I needed to be very quiet in the background. And she had a heating system that I could hear the fan. I'm like, no. This is an audio. I want high quality sound. And so Karen was like, I have to turn off my heat. And she lives across the river from Canada in Michigan. And she's like, I'm going to freeze in here. So we have to stop and pause every so often so she could warm back up and turn the heater
oh
back.
my goodness.
And I won't tell the story about Nikki when we had to record twice. Nikki was the second or third person to go. So it was still very new for both of us. And the first, I think we recorded for like an hour and a half and neither one of us liked it. We were like, nope, we stopped. It was 1 a.m. or 11:30 at night. We said we're going to start all over from scratch. We recorded another hour and a half and we ended up like stopping at 2 a.m.
But remember the piano shelf?
So
crashed?
we have to pad the rooms because we're doing this remotely and I don't want any echoing. And so I said, you have to pad the room. So there was blankets and yoga mats that she threw all over the furniture to make it sound like a recording. So she sent me the picture.
In my living room. I tore up my living room for this.
The things we do for daughter dialogue.
Yes. Lots of stories like that. People recorded in their closet.
It was so great though.
Yes. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And I'm so glad that it's going to be preserved into perpetuity. Because again, they won't forget. Yeah, you got to do more. You got to do more.
The typical pace of an oral history project is 3 weeks per person. I was running it 1 week per person, and so I had to break and do seasons. It's a lot of work because it's not just the recording. I have to do a lot of documentation afterwards, before and after. So it's just really hard. And I wish if somebody's listening to this, Michelle, and they have a grant that they want to give so they can put some money towards hearing more of these, I can record more people.
Oh, okay. Y'all hear that out there in Snack Nation?
Grant, we need some funding. We need help.
You did a fantastic job, and you had all the requirements. You got to get this kind of headset, and it's got to have this quality. No, that's not going to work. You got to get the one, the model and the make, and I was fine with it though.
Because I haven't gotten Patricia yet. There's so many stories to get.
Okay, we gotta catch everybody. Yeah, it was absolutely fun to do. Fun. Yeah. And so Michelle, I want to get to the one question here for
Michelle.
Yeah.
Before you go on, I'd like for you to tell a little bit about. I was thinking about your dialogue about the UN.
Oh yeah. So
let the audience know about that.
Oh, thank you. So when I was working as a executive at another company in Illinois, we were talking about long-term evolution, or LTE. This is when LTE first came out. And so I was invited to the UN. So I flew overseas to give a presentation on how to use LTE in disaster recovery. And that was one of those things you got to have on your resume. You never forget to put that on the resume, right? But it was an amazing experience because, for one, it was a bunch of men, and it was just me as the only African American. So When I went into the room, I'm looking around. It's kind of the way it's, yeah, situated. I'm looking. It's kind of dark in the little back. You know, it was kind of dark in a bit. I was looking around. I didn't see anybody else look like me. Then they called me up to the stage, and I'm sitting up there, and I'm actually sitting in a chair and just giving my story. And I'm like, am I doing this?
Right.
Is this really happening? But no, it was yeah, a lot of people, I don't think even my family know that I have done that work at the, spoke at the UN on behalf of
Wow.
my company. So I might, I know my mom who might be listening, she knows, and some other folks, but a lot of people don't know. I don't brag about it, but Patricia said you brought it up.
Yeah.
And talk about it. But no, it is one of the proudest moments, I think, in my professional career.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And being, a pioneer on that technology. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody got LTE. We're talking 5G. This is when 4G was just coming out. So, and then to be selected, by my company to even participate in that. Not everybody gets tapped on the shoulder to do something, but I know that was God that touched me and said, no, it's going to be you. You're going to do this and you're going to do it okay. I wasn't interesting. I wasn't nervous. Like sometimes I'm nervous on the simplest things, like a smack show. Like we just talking like we're in our living room, when we are in most cases, just having a good time amongst friends. But it was so comfortable. I was at peace. And another one of those, check the box for myself in my career. So thank you. Thanks for bringing it up, Patricia.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I want to I have a pointed question for Nikki. You're in the process of becoming a certified genealogist. Now, I claim to be a genealogist in my own right, but I ain't certified, So for one, congratulations on that. But I want you to talk to us about what that all entails to become a certified genealogist. Okay, we can't hear you again. I think you're on mute this time.
Sorry, I went to my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Can you hear me?
No problem.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned in the bio, I was awarded a scholarship with the Board of Certified Genealogists, BCG. And a little bit about BCG is that they were established in 1964, and BCG is a credentialing body created to foster public confidence in genealogy. And we all know why. I don't need to explain why we need to do that and why there has to be standards for genealogy, because there's a long history of people selling certificates and saying you can say that you're a descendant of so and so. If you give me $25 for the certificate, I'll sell you one. So there was a need for that decades ago. But to become a certified genealogist, you have to submit your writing samples, your work samples, your research samples, and you assemble a portfolio. And then your portfolio is peer reviewed and it's evaluated according to a set of rubrics based off the genealogical proof standard. And the samples for BCG, there are others organizations, APG, but for BCG, the work samples, you have to transcribe a document, for example. You have to provide a research report. It can be for your family or for someone else. You have to provide a kinship determination project where you link 3 generations together and you document that. And you also have to do a case study where you have a problem, you have a research question, and you document the process you use to attempt to solve the problem, because it's important to note you can have a research question, but you may not get to the answer. So, as we know, all these questions are not solvable.
Right.
But if you document your process and you explain what you're doing, that's you meet the criteria for that. And it's important to know when you do all this, it doesn't have to be one of the information that I remember someone saying, it doesn't have to be complex what you do. It just has to be accurate and well researched. So I wanted to do that because to get this information out of my head, I recommend to write your stories down, get it out of your computer, get it off your OneDrive, your Google Drive, get it out of your file cabinet and publish the work. So that's why I did that. That's why I applied for the scholarship. So wish me luck for
Yeah,
the next year.
Yeah.
That's a good point too, because yeah, a lot of it is in my head or on like some of it is on
A flash
Ancestry,
drive.
Yeah.
flash
Yes.
drives, and wherever, but having it published and then out in the world, that's why these daughter dialogues, as an example, is so important.
Exactly.
And doing more of that and what you're doing now, publishing your story. Well, this is wonderful, ladies, and I know we're over time, so I want to just close with one last question for each of you. What should a Black woman who is interested in joining the DAR do to become a member? Are there any tips or advice that you can give?
I have one.
Okay.
Listen to daughter dialogues.
Very good point.
I'm
one.
just not being self-promotion here. I'm not. I'm promoting the histories of the women who have done it before them. And I've heard from so many people that it's inspired them to know that, oh, if they can do it, then I can do it. So if you really want to hear in-depth information about women who have gone through the process and what their experience was like, listen to the oral histories, binge listen on it, put your headset on, and you've got 25 of them right now to hear and more to come. And I think it's an inspiring story, starting with Karen. Start there.
But the process, if you're Black or if whatever, it's for all women. Anyone interested in joining, you go to the website, dar.org, and you submit a member interest. There should be a member interest form there. And you will put a little information about yourself, your state, and where you are, and then someone from that state will reach out to you. And as Karen explained in the beginning, you can get invited from a number of chapters. It's important, as Karen said, do your due diligence. You are also evaluating, as we said, you are evaluating them, they're evaluating you and your paperwork, and you decide if that chapter is right for you. If you need something more, if you need a little less, if whatever you need, you keep going to different chapters. And certainly it's important to know if you are in a major metropolitan area, there will be dozens of chapters. So you can take years. You can keep attending meetings not as long as you want. I think like a year, you can't, if that's still in play, you can't, like after a year, you can't keep attending meetings without becoming a member. But then change a chapter, go to another chapter for a year and just see how you like it. Or
Yeah.
I don't know what the time limit is. I'm joking, but yeah, just you evaluate if that chapter is right for you. So.
And before you go to the DAR website, you go to your family. You go to the eldest person in your family and you get the stories. And what I tell people is our oral history are clues. They may not turn out to be fact, but every piece of oral history that I've taken from my family, from my elders, it's been clues that takes me further back in my family history. And so really what DAR is just maybe an inspiration to you to get started on doing your family history. And that's all, so one of the things that they will tell you when you do apply is that you need to provide documentation of the first 3 generations of your family, that being you, your parents' generation, and your grandparents, and how they connect. And so do that work. I mean, just sit down and start, like you're the daughter of these 2 people. Who are they? Tell about where they were born, figure out where they were born, the dates and all of that. But this is the work that you do to prepare to apply for DAR isn't just for DAR. It's for you and your family.
It's for your whole family reunion.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the advice I would give.
That's what I did, Karen. My family, my O'Kelly family, my Black O'Kelly family, I went to my reunions, and that's where I got the stories from.
Yeah, I did the
My
same thing.
the line that I have joined DAR on is from the line that I attended my family reunions that my mother took me to since we were little kids. Black O'Kelly's, my family, we have been meeting since 1930.
Mm.
And
Wow.
every 2 years, we stopped doing World War II. We've stopped during, well, not stopped, we have suspended during COVID. But yes, that's where I got the information from. And my cousin Joyce Ann Houston, she's a daughter, also family historian, and we took the stories, working together, and now I'm waiting for my whole family reunion to to take me up on my offer to help them out, help them join. But yes, talk to your family. That's where you start.
That's right.
Mhm.
Exactly. The people who
And
laid the foundation
Yeah.
for you to do that, to do this.
And
it,
sometimes older people, now that I'm older, I guess maybe I'm not the example, but when I was younger, the elders in my family, I mean, they had come through, like my dad's side through lynchings and,
Mhm.
just really troubled times. And so they may say, oh, I don't want to talk about that. But, you keep asking, you keep pushing the envelope. And at some point, you will get the information that you want to get from them. And my genealogy muse was my great Aunt Clara. And no one ever wanted to hear all the family stories she had to share. And I called her. She was so grateful. She sent me a little letter on some odd yellow paper. I still have it. But the point is that, people keep this stuff because they want to share it with the next generation. And so that's part of what bonds our families together. And
Mhm.
it's all good.
It is.
one tip, if they have Louisiana ancestry, South Louisiana ancestry, they can look in these books by a priest, get his name right. Bear is his last name, and the books are called Southwest Louisiana Records. And those books will help you to shave what would take years into weeks of research. You
I've
can go
seen that
back and,
book.
oh,
I've
they're
used that.
awesome. They're awesome.
Mm.
So anybody that's helping somebody with their lineage, or if you're doing it yourself and you have South Louisiana heritage, get those books, Southwest Louisiana Records, and they're in any library and in any of the big metropolitan areas. It's about a 10, 12 volume
Mm.
index. And what they are, you look up your person's name and then you'll find either their birth certificate, it's all indexes, and they'll tell you where to go to get the actual record, like go to the church or go to this particular courthouse to get the actual records.
Mm.
And of course, now you can get a lot of that online, or call the municipalities for it. So
Mm.
awesome, awesome. I mean, it really does knock it down from years into weeks of research.
Wow.
Yeah, I love those
Okay.
books. Yeah.
Sounds like an interesting read for sure. I love history, so I'm going back to read about what you talked about today too, Patricia, because I'm
Oh,
really
okay.
intrigued now.
Okay. Actually, look up the Acadians, and that'll get you started.
Okay.
Mm.
And my ancestor, there's a picture. I can tell you when we get offline, but he has a picture online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, of
Cool.
of when they moved to Louisiana.
So
Wow.
then
Yeah,
you're eligible, probably, Patricia, for the Huguenot Society.
I need to look into that. I don't know if
Look
that's
into
what.
that.
Yeah, I know they were Acadians. I'm not
Yeah, they
sure if
were. The
they.
Huguenots came
Uh-huh.
over and then they went down into Louisiana. And
Mm.
Oh, okay.
so they have a whole society. It's
South
I mean,
Carolina.
yeah,
Yeah, I need to
pretty
look into that because I
prestigious.
thought they were like a different lineage, but I'm gonna look into it
Maybe
because
not.
yeah,
Maybe not.
yeah,
All
might all
right.
be cousins.
Yeah.
We are. We just
Yeah.
haven't figured out yet. We are.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had a couple of questions on the chat, and this first one is from Monique, Getzinger. She said she would be interested to know if this is to Patricia, to know if your patriot knew my patriot, Matthew Deveau de Plateau from France, who lives in Louisiana and was in the militia under Governor Bernardo Galvez.
Quite possible. There were a few different militias. Mine was in the Opelousas militia, but there was also Point Coupé. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, but something like that. And Donaldsonville, there were like 4 or 5 militias. So it depends on which one that her ancestors served. But more than like if he was Opelousas, then I'm sure they knew each other.
Mm-hmm. And there's a comment from one Facebook user stating, my grandfather, General Washington Coates, was either born in Mississippi or Louisiana. If he wasn't, I know his dad was born in Louisiana. So I don't know, maybe he was part of the militia as well. Let's see, we got some really good comments. So you feel free to read the fun comments on here. People really like this show. Risha, will you be doing more daughter dialogues?
Yes, Risha.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. We have a Facebook user saying they are a proud DAR member. Find your local chapter and get involved. Let's see. blacko'kellys.org. Thanks for the shout out, cousin. blacko'kellys.org is your website. And just really good comments on here. Yeah, so when you have some time, ladies, just take a look at them. But I think we probably piqued some interest in people to consider either doing just family history recording. And you never know, it might be like Karen, you might just stumble across a Revolutionary War patriot, and you'll be one of our sisters one day. And if you're a man, hey, sons, we can be brother and sister, because there's also an organization for the men. And that will be eventually one of my next shows, is that I want to get a panel like this, and I want to get the men on, because honestly, I don't know a lot about their organization. In many ways, they may be very similar to DAR, but just have an understanding. So I know you said, Nikki, you have a cousin that just joined the Sons, and so maybe he might be interested, and we can see if we can get a group of men on here too to talk about their journey into the Sons of the American Revolution.
I got names for you.
Yeah.
So just let me know. Yeah, I have at least 3 names.
Michael Henderson from
Michael
whose family
Henderson
is
and Rick
from
Murphy.
Louisiana, Patricia.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's Monique. That's
Henderson.
Monique's cousin.
Yeah,
Monique's
he's from the book,
cousin.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Rick Murphy, Arthur Rick Murphy.
Okay. Well, I will
And
definitely
they're on
be
Facebook.
reaching out to get those names. Or are you making introductions to?
Of course, and they know people too. I remember I met a
Okay.
guy in Mississippi. They're all over. There's several in the DC, Maryland,
Yep,
DMV
there's
area.
Bill Ritchie in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Awesome.
I don't know if my cousin wants me throwing his name out, so I won't.
Like, don't sign me up for that. Well,
I'll ask him. No, I'm sure he'd be
well,
happy.
ladies, I think we're gonna close for now. I mean, I know just like all my shows, they always go over an hour. I should stop booking them for an hour, because it's always so interesting whenever you get enlightened and empowered and educated and energized. And this by far has been an energetic and exciting show. And I just thank you so much for taking the time
for doing this.
Thank you.
Oh, in the
Michelle.
comments, Yvonne said children of the American Revolution as well. You need to have some kids on here too.
Yes.
We have names for you too for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up here, I'd like to give a special thank you out to all of my panelists here: Karen Batchelor, Risha Rainey, Patricia Samuels, and Nikki Sebastian. And all of you out there in Smack Nation, thank you so very much. Always being supportive of this show. We're going to keep it going. And if you have any ideas of shows what you would like us to talk about, just hit me up and let me know your thoughts, because we're always looking for great ideas in Smack Productions. So with that, I'm going to wrap up here and just say, everybody be safe, stay safe. You know, we're not quite out of the woods with this pandemic, although I know in certain places they've been loosening things up. And I'd love to see you all next month here on SMAC Productions. Have a good night.
Thank you, Michelle.
Good night. Thank
Thank
you.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.